After Senmut, pharaohs in the Valley of the Kings would copy this. It's really neat. We know Senmut wanted to be buried here. He covered the walls with spells from the Book of the Dead. And then he had a request. O you who are among the land of the living, be you scribe or priest, say the magical spells for Senmut, the steward of Amun.
There may have been a special reason why Hatshepsut permitted Senmut to build his tomb within the precincts of her temple. Senmut's tomb tunnels straight towards the Valley of the Kings, just a few hundred yards away. That's where Hatshepsut had built her tomb. Unable to express their love openly in life, they may have intended to spend eternity together. And you'll see, they may have pulled it off. Senmut died before Hatshepsut, and just a few years later, she joined him in the next world. Her tomb, on the other side of the mountains, is one of the strangest in the Valley of the Kings.
This is Hatshepsut's tomb. There's a lot of history here, ancient and modern. It was discovered in 1903 by Howard Carter, about 20 years before he found Tutankhamun's tomb. But when Carter found it, this tomb was full of rubble, washed in by the occasional rainstorm that hits the Valley of the Kings. It was as hard as cement, and his workmen had to chip it out with pickaxes. It was one of the most difficult excavations in the history of the valley.
After 2 months of clearing, Carter had to stop. The air in the tomb was so bad and hot that the workmen's candles began to melt and go out. Eventually, they brought in electric lights, something really modern for the time. They kept clearing the passage, but it never seemed to end. It turned out to be the longest and deepest tomb in the valley. You see, in the early construction of the tomb, Hatshepsut's workmen hit bad rock that wasn't suitable for carving wall decorations. So they kept going, descending, twisting and turning in search of fine limestone. They never found it. I really wanted to reach the burial chamber, but the same thing that gave Carter so much trouble stopped me. Recent rains had washed rubble into the tomb and blocked the burial chamber. Anyway, Carter finally did reach the burial chamber, where he found 2 beautiful red quartzite sarcophagi, one inscribed for Hatshepsut and one for her father. She had opened her father's tomb and had his mummy removed to her tomb for reburial. In death, as in life, Hatshepsut wanted strong men close to her. After Hatshepsut's death, her stepson, Tuthmosis III, at last became Pharaoh. All his years of training with the army paid off. He was the greatest military pharaoh in Egypt's history. During his 33 years as king, he personally led 17 military campaigns. Palestine and Syria were subdued, and Tuthmosis pushed far to the north, crossing the Euphrates into modern-day Iraq. The new king was able to make such bold military moves because Hatshepsut had maintained the army. He inherited a prosperous, well-governed country and could have hung up his shield and begun to construct great monuments to his glory. But Tuthmosis III was not much interested in building. He seems to have been most comfortable leading his army, and this may well explain his relationship with Hatshepsut. While she was ruling as king, he was probably quite happy training and leading the life of a military man. The remains of a red stone chapel built by Hatshepsut at Karnak Temple suggest this was a mutually beneficial relationship. The dismantled blocks, awaiting reassembly by French Egyptologists, bear the names of both Hatshepsut and Tuthmosis, and they're shown side by side as co-rulers. They weren't competitors. But after Tuthmosis had reigned for 20 years, there seems to have been a change of heart. That's when Hatshepsut's red chapel was dismantled. Hatshepsut's name was erased on all her monuments and was replaced with the name of her father, her husband, or her successor. Any male would do. History was being rewritten. Hatshepsut never existed. It had been decided that Egypt could not have had a woman who was king. It was not the traditional way. Divine order had been upset. But as you'll see, history has a way of evening the score. In the 1870s, one of the greatest archaeological finds of all time was uncovered. More than a dozen royal mummies were found in a single tomb. In ancient times, the Valley of the Kings had become unsafe, and the mummies of the kings and queens of Egypt were gathered and buried in a cache. Discovered by Egyptian authorities, the mummies were hastily moved to the museum in Cairo. In the cache were the mummies of Tuthmosis I, the Second, the Third, Ramses the Great, and other great Egyptians. Among the dozens of mummies found, several were unidentified, and it's just possible that two of them were Hatshepsut and Senmut. Among the objects found with the mummies is a box with the cartouche of Hatshepsut carved on it. Inside is her liver, removed by the embalmers at the time of mummification. Since her liver is there, it's reasonable to conclude that one of the unidentified female mummies from the cache may well be Hatshepsut. There is also the possibility that one of the unidentified males is Senmut. We know what he looked like. Ancient artists have left sketches of him, all with a slight double chin, a sign of prosperity. But they also show distinct lines on the cheeks, which is unusual. Winlock, the American excavator who found the sketches of Senmut, said, "As for the wrinkles, they were surely the feature by which he was known." Now, one of the mummies found in the communal tomb was described by the anatomist who first examined it as probably a high official, well advanced in years. It could be Senmut. What's really interesting about this mummy, known as Unknown Man C, is the deep wrinkles in his cheeks. I like to think that with all the tomb robberies and all the moving of mummies, Hatshepsut and Senmut may even now rest in the same storage room in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, closer to each other than they had ever hoped. Hatshepsut's 22-year reign was a great success by any standard. She initiated bold trading expeditions, monumental building projects, and successful military campaigns. It was a time of prosperity for Egypt. Yet Hatshepsut's name was eventually erased by the very man she groomed to follow her as Pharaoh of Egypt. So why, after 20 years, did Tuthmosis III attempt to destroy the memory of Hatshepsut? It probably wasn't vengeance, as some have suggested. It had in fact to do with the notion of divine order in ancient Egypt. The concept of kingship allowed for pharaohs to be many things: warriors, builders, diplomats, administrators. But it could not permit it to be recorded that a woman had been king. The crime that caused Hatshepsut to be omitted from the lists of the kings of Egypt seems simply to have been that she was a woman. But you can't keep a good woman down. Today, if you want to see the most beautiful temple in Egypt, visit Hatshepsut's temple at Deir el-Bahari. And if you want to see the tallest obelisk in all of Egypt, visit Karnak Temple and marvel at Hatshepsut's obelisk. Almost as if she could foretell the future, Hatshepsut wrote,
"Those who shall see my monuments in future years and shall speak of what I have done, beware of saying, 'It did not happen,' nor say, 'It was a boast,' but rather, 'How like her this is, how worthy of her father.'